And unfortunately, the company had seen some examples of that when their product or some of their processes looked to be showing up in competitors' products. So it was very eye-opening to the business for them to, see that, hey, our information had likely been compromised, and now we were potentially losing competitive advantage in the marketplace because we didn't have good security controls in place.
This is a Security Weekly production. Security Weekly is a resource of Cyber Risk Alliance.
The Cybersecurity Collaborative is proud to present CISO Stories. Each week, CISO Stories takes a deep dive on security leadership with one of the contributors to my latest book, the best-selling CISO Compass: Navigating Cybersecurity Leadership Challenges with Insights from Pioneers, as well as other top CISOs and industry security leaders. The Cybersecurity Collaborative is a unique membership community enabling cybersecurity leaders to work together in a trusted environment. To learn more, visit securityweekly.com/CSC or visit cyberleadersunite.com. I am your host, Todd Fitzgerald, and this week we welcome Michael Boucher, CISO Americas at JLL.
I started to work on a project with their information security director on laptop theft. He was concerned about the information on the machines. I was concerned about the physical assets, so we partnered on that project. After we wrapped it up in about 3 months, he said, I could really use somebody with your skills on my team. Have you ever thought about coming over into information security? And I said, I'm, actually very interested. I'm kind of bored in what I'm doing. I'm looking for my next challenge. And I said I was either considering going into, information security or into more of a, hardcore fraud investigation route. And I felt that because I didn't have a degree in computer security, would I be able to meet that challenge? Would I be able, measure up against, the other people in that team? And he said, no, I really need somebody with your skills that can teach my team some of the things that you know. He said, the technology stuff, we can teach you. That's not a problem. So I made the leap, been in information ever since for 20 plus years.
That's very interesting because a lot of people, come into this field and come up through the technical path, and it's nice to see, people making that switch and then learning the technical side, so you actually, can get enough knowledge in there to be effective in the security field.
I think it's part of the mindset that, security people need to have, is that you always need to be learning. You always need to be, working with people that are in the field to try to understand what they know and to, get that knowledge transfer. And then you're able to teach them some things along the way as well. So when I went into the information security team, I really embedded the network security people, the security engineering people, understanding how VPNs work, understanding, how does authentication work in our, system. It was really kind of, at the beginnings of Active Directory. So there was a lot of opportunities to learn there. How does our antivirus and our desktop work? So it was really a great experience. I loved it because I love learning new things. And that I was there to learn, and wasn't coming in with, attitudes or preconceived notions, but wanting to learn, wanting to be a resource to help, and was very successful. Was very good. I worked with some great people that were experts in their fields, and I learned a lot.
Yeah, I think that is good to have that really good mindset. So you wrote a great piece for the CISO Compass book, Navigating Cybersecurity Leadership Challenges with Insights from Pioneers, and it was called Data Protection, Security Intellectual Property. And you talked about how you're expected to meet resistance for a variety of reasons: budget constraints, corporate culture, lack of executive support. And you talked about how you were starting a data protection project within your organization. Could you talk to us a little bit about how you started that project and what the issue was?
Sure. Yeah, this was a great this was a great and memorable moment in my career, and was really glad to be able to share it with your book. So I was working, 100-plus-year-old manufacturing company, global, the leader in their space, and they had brought in myself and a few others. I was probably security employee like number 3 on the team. We had a small team. The security program was started because they had a couple of securities that had gotten risen to the board level, and the board said, you need to create a security program. So when I came in, was quickly asked to look at data protection, and so was working with our chief intellectual property counsel, who was a tremendous cheerleader for the security program. He was also new to the company. He'd been there probably a little over a year, and I had been there probably about 7-8 months at the time. And we worked together because he was very concerned about the engineers and people that had access to very confidential information going off to competitors. So we had partnered together to look at how can we better increase our protection controls around the intellectual property, which was thousands and hundreds of thousands of documents and drawings for processes, machinery, across a couple of different manufacturing processes, for the product. So we, worked on policy, we worked on education for those engineers. We did a security penetration test that held that information to look at as there vulnerabilities that we needed to correct, and also to put in some DLP controls for the people that actually had access to that information as well, so that we were better able to monitor activity and how they were interacting with that information.
So, this is something that in a lot of organizations, that just not having that perspective of how much intellectual property there actually is. And how did you go about figuring out what intellectual property there was within the organization?
Really partnering with the business and understanding, what is valuable to them, because, professional and information security professional, and him as a legal professional, it's difficult for us to, say exactly, hey, this is the crown jewels of the organization. In a lot of cases, it takes sometimes, multiple putting together some of those documents, multiple iterations of those documents to, put a process together. So it's definitely working with the business to understand their information and explain to them, how this information can be, moved off of our network and, used externally. And unfortunately, the company had seen some examples of that when their product or some of their processes looked to be showing up in competitors' products. So it was very eye-opening to the business for them to, see that, hey, our information had likely been compromised, and now we were potentially losing competitive advantage in the marketplace because we didn't have good security controls in place. And then as we implemented some of these controls, specifically DLP, when we had people that were leaving the organization, it was very eye-opening to them to see, we'd have a normal baseline of a user's activity, but, when they, gave notice that they may be leaving, we saw a massive spike in their access or the information that they may have downloaded or put to a USB drive or burned off to a CD. And, then we took that as a moment, to have a conversation with the individual, reaffirming with them that, the information that they had copied was company information and needs to stay with us. So definitely was, education and eye-opening to the business. And then also us reinforcing good security and legal practices and HR practices of having those conversations with those people. Unfortunately, we had to go to court a few times with some individuals that had left and taken property with them.
Interesting. So did the the DLP processes that you put in place, was that used as evidence in court for that?
It was. Our chief intellectual property counsel went to court and got injunctions on 3 individuals that had left for competitors. And ultimately, the court required them to turn the information back over to us, which was, very, very good, and it was very interesting processes to understand on our side, in terms of, hey, we needed to give affidavits, and then we had to be deposed as well a couple of times. So definitely. Gets you as a security professional much more involved with the legal process and understanding how you partner with legal and all the different aspects of things that you may need to go through in your career, that is really just not, very technical, but is seeing how it plays out in the legal field.
And at what point do you start monitoring the downloads of these files?
Yeah, we were able to. So we had a fairly well-defined number of users that had access to that vault of information. Was a couple thousand people. And we were able to, establish a baseline monitor for how often people were accessing things, when they might need to download something. So we were building historical information across these users, continuously. And so when a user actually, left the organization or was getting ready to leave the organization, we saw some massive increases on those users, where they were downloading thousands of files. And that was definitely outside of the norm of baseline activity. So we were able to get alerts on those. And then when we saw those, a lot of times we gave our intellectual property counsel a call and said, hey, we saw this, interesting increase in user activity. And he said, well, that's very interesting, because I just heard, is leaving the organization. And so he had worked actually with, members of that business unit and HR, that when people with that level of access left, he was informed when that person gave notice. So it was very good for us to sync up on those events.
The article this podcast is based upon can be viewed in the best-selling cybersecurity leadership book, CISO Compass, Navigating Cybersecurity Leadership Challenges with Insights from Pioneers. So it sounds like there was a lot of value added with this project. How did you sell this in the very beginning of the need to do this?
Yeah, that was a very interesting. A very interesting situation, because the company was going through, that digital transformation at the time. So they were in the process of implementing a brand new ERP system, which really had, most of the technology group's focus. The CIO, he was, laser focused on getting this ERP implemented. So we were somewhat of a distraction and an annoyance, to a bit. He had been with the company for many years, and he also too was a very hard customer for us to work with in terms of, selling security. And so talking with him, extensively about, the need for this information, what the results were, how we felt we needed to harden our, defenses of the cybersecurity vault. Really, it took us to bring the leaders of the business into the conversation with him to make sure that we were getting the right funding, and also our chief intellectual property counsel. So getting the business and legal behind us with the business case, then to bring to the CIO that says, hey, we need to fund this is important. And so that ultimately was the things that were successful in getting DLP program implemented, and being able to be moved from just a project to really a steady state program, with bringing in another resource that was going to help manage it and monitor it full time.
And you had the challenge of where the CIO was saying, why do we need this big brother project? How do you get around that kind of positioning?
Yeah, and you used the term that was used a lot in in those conversations as well too, as Big Brother, and it was going to educating them on the need that this is company information. It's not personal information. We are monitoring the assets of the company. And because people had worked there for long periods of time, wasn't, untold that, somebody would spend their entire career with this company. So they felt that some of the information that they created was really theirs. And in some cases, they had created patents on some of these processes. And so they're named patent, but the patent also too is the property of the company, not the individual. You may have been credited as the person that, created this, but it's really still the property of the company. So was working through them again with a lot of education and a lot of conversations, and also to awareness and conversations with the engineering community. So needing to talk with them about security. So presented to them several times at some of their gatherings, talking about the importance of this information. How we wanted to make sure that, the good work that they were doing, that we were protecting it appropriately, because we want to continue to be the leaders in the space, have the pride in that, and make sure that, we're protecting it appropriately. So it was really a lot of educational awareness and effort to make sure that they're understanding the value of the information. So it was really a lot of selling internally to get this. And again, so those are things that, security leaders need to be able to, to do, because you need to be able to communicate at the business level and down to people that aren't technical around security, and help educate them about how we can better secure their information and what the business value and importance of it is.
I mean, we always talk about, and it's almost become cliche that security needs to be a business enabler. But what I liked about what you put in there is that that you had a subsequent joint venture project with China, where you were able to have that project because you were able to secure the information and provide the appropriate access to who needed it for that joint venture.
Yeah, that was a really interesting project, and it was, something that I, was really excited to work on. Again, working with our legal department, because we had created a joint venture with a company in China. So we were going to build a state-of-the-art facility just outside of Beijing, and I had the opportunity to go over there a couple of times and work with our joint venture partner to get our DLP software installed, because we were also using some Chinese engineers, and part of the deal was that we had to give them the latest and greatest of our IP and technology as part of the project. So we had to give them, so we had collected a subset of information out of our vault that we needed to give to our joint venture partner. And so we created a special database of that. We actually created and built the workstations that those engineers were going to use, and included our DLP software on there. We made sure it wasn't able to be uninstalled or tampered with. We had, a red team take a look at that to make sure that we could maintain persistence, of the DLP agent on there. Was very, very well put together, and I think it was very successful. And also too, on the legal side, our legal counsel was actually able to put a surety bond in place that in the event that it was seen that IP may have been lost, because all of a sudden your product may be turning up in a competitor, that we would have the ability to basically access or cash in that bond. It's basically an insurance policy with the joint venture, and they would be liable for $2 million. So a lot of negotiation, a lot of interpretation as well too, because I don't speak Mandarin. So we needed to get through a lot of interpreters, and it was very interesting because it took quite a few negotiations to get the DLP software approved. And it was quite ironic because they called it spyware, which I thought was, the irony was very very funny.
Very interesting. This has been great, Michael. Are there any other things, final thoughts that you'd like to share with emerging CISOs, current experienced CISOs, as they're going down this journey and looking at intellectual property?
I think that, what I would like to talk with, or give my, benefit of some of my experience, and I see this in my business today, of trying to help the business and the business executives understand what their information is that provides value, and how do we protect it. So we're involved in that today at JLL. So we're trying to work with our business to help understand what is the most important information and how do we protect it. And it's really engaging with the business. I can't stress enough, because they will end up coming to you in cases, and we've seen it in here at JLL and other companies that I've worked with, where they feel that maybe something had been compromised. And if we would have had conversations up front and really partnered with the business to get security embedded in the business and really be that enabler, we could have avoided some situations that, unfortunately, information may not have gone to a competitor, or information may have been taken by an employee, or we may have had some processes in place where we've been able to quickly detect it and have a conversation and reinforce with that person that, this is company property, it's not personal information, and we need to make sure that, we're protecting it appropriately. That, I think, is, just one of the key things, is that a lot of people think that because they've worked for a company for a long period of time, and the data that they produce, the documents that they create or the process they create, belong to them. And sometimes they just need to be reminded that, this is the property of the company, and we need to have a conversation about what you're going to be able to take and what you might be able to use.
I think that's a great perspective, Michael, and thank you so much for putting this piece together for the CISO Compass book, and for what you do in the community. I know you work with the Chicago CISO of the Year program, and you've been out there in the community and helping other CISOs grow as well. So thank you very much for what you do for the community as well.
Thanks, Todd. No, I really appreciate that, for the kind words, and really appreciate, our friendship over the years and everything that you do, and opportunity to contribute to your book and be a part of this podcast. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Visit more CISO Stories podcasts on securityweekly.com, where you will find an index to prior episodes. The Cybersecurity Collaborative is a unique membership community enabling cybersecurity leaders to work together in a trusted environment. To learn more, visit securityweekly.com/CSC or visit cyberleadersunite.com.